Hello, everyone. Today I have another new guest. She is Sally, and she is actually doing very interesting work, especially sustainability related things. She is working. She is working with EOS as an NGO, and she is doing a lot of volunteering work, especially in global warming. Sustainability is very important, as well as World Talent Economy Forum. We are working with this sustainability, and we are helping different countries how we can solve the global sustainable issues. So she is an expert on that particular point, as well as she graduated from National University of Singapore. She has research work on that global warming and sustainability. So she will introduce about her experience, about her solution, and especially about Singapore. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm I'm doing very well, and thank you for having me here on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you please introduce yourself, your name, your academic backgrounds, and your NGO related activities?
I'm Sarah Sally Lim. I am currently training to become a software engineer or programmer. I graduated from NUS with a BA in political science, and I wrote my honors thesis on the relationship between climate change and technological progress. And I'm currently volunteering with the Earth Organization of Sustainability, which is an international NGO. I am on their board of members, and the work that I do for them is 100% volunteer work.
Very interesting. So, can you please share with us about the present pandemic situation in Singapore? What's the conditions in COVID-19 period in Singapore?
Surprisingly, Singapore is actually handling the pandemic quite well. We're getting a few hundred cases a day, but we are very, very careful here. Our whole population is very conscientious, and we're quite particular about sticking to the rules and about social distancing. And there are fines for not wearing a mask here. So I would say that the situation here is being handled very well. We've only had 26 deaths out of a population of nearly 6 million. But I think
Okay.
that, yeah.
Yes, I have a specific question because we know that Singapore is a very good role model around the world. And most importantly, they take a lot of initiative for sustainability and this kind of things. Can you share with what type of new technology actually Singapore right now they are using for sustainability?
Well, one of the more interesting outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic, or should we say a silver lining, is that Singapore has now kickstarted the 30 by 30 initiative, which means that by 2030, we aim to grow at least 30% of our own food in terms of improving our food self-sufficiency. And that's going to be quite a big jump because as of current, we only produce 10% of our own food. But I think our government has realized that we cannot afford to be complacent anymore because the COVID-19 pandemic has made economic pundits all over the world talk about the possibility that global supply chain could break down. And we've already seen the fallout of COVID-19 impacting the agricultural industries in America, Latin America, and other parts of Southeast Asia. So I think this has been a wake-up call for all of us.
Okay, this is really alarming. You say wake up call for all of us, and specifically Singapore, like agricultural things. You say 90% of your agricultural product you actually import.
Yes,
Yes,
because we are a service-based, technology-focused financial hub, but we grow very little of our own food. I mean, we're quite fortunate in that we're very wealthy, so we can afford to import basically anything we like. but we should not be complacent about that, because there might come a day where having all the money in the world doesn't really help us very much if the global food supply chains break down, like due to a war or another spate of natural disasters, or another, or possibly even another freak pandemic.
Yes, I just want to know about your NGO activities, about EOS, these NGO activities, how it works, how you contributing as you are volunteers, what type of initiative you are taking right now in Singapore, even outside Singapore. Do you do any kind of job activities or anything?
Most of my activities with EOS right now are international. I'm trying to get EOS to collaborate with another green organization in America called the Post Carbon Institute. So I'm trying to link up a podcast collaboration between the both of them, and I'm and I'm trying to work with one of my fellow board members and a friend of mine on some initiatives for green investing and investing in renewable energy startups or renewable agriculture startups. That hasn't really gone off the ground yet due to both of us being very busy and not really having the time for this. But EOS has a very broad range of activities, because we don't have a lot of centralized organization. It's more like the model of EOS is such that it's got like groups all over the world, and each group decides how they want to run them, what they want to do, and what kind of projects they would like to run. It's more about like promoting the EOS message and then tailoring it to suit the needs of your own country or your own city, and to adapt the culture there.
Yes, I understand. Beside that, I just want to know, as you are in one of the places where 90% of agricultural product actually import. Beside that, you have expertise in soil science as well as agricultural point of view. So how you trying to solve these agricultural issues in Singapore? Beside that, Singapore government and corporations, what type of agricultural related initiative they are taking right now?
Well, we are looking, well, as part of the 30 by 30 initiative, the government has rolled out more grants to help local farmers, especially small farmers and farming startups. But I think that for us to produce 30% of our own food by 2030, we are going to need a lot more funding, and we're going to have to seriously rethink about how much food we actually waste, because Singapore has the highest amount of food wastage per capita out of all the countries in Southeast Asia, because we are very wealthy and quite complacent. We don't have anyone starving to death in Singapore. It's impossible to starve to death in Singapore, right?
Yes, yes, yes. No, we know that Singapore has. Yes, yes, please.
I'm currently collaborating with another NGO called Free Food for All, and they are focused on minimizing food waste in Singapore. But I might think about hosting a joint collaboration between Free Food for All and EOS. Not now, but maybe in the future. But an affiliate of Free Food for All that I'm currently volunteering with is a soil restoration startup that is focusing on bringing the science of soil restoration to Singapore and hopefully expanding out to Southeast Asia eventually. The reason why I consider soil restoration so important is because it's the most scientifically advanced alternative to chemical agriculture and industrial agriculture that we have right now. It's a very new field, mostly based on the work of a pair of Harvard scientists, Anne Bickel and her husband, and it has not received a lot of attention, but it's estimated that if we apply that if soil restoration as a science actually took off, we could actually be able to feed a population of 10 billion people using maybe 1/3 of the chemical fertilizers and fossil fuel fertilizers that we're using right now. 10 million people on 1/3 of the chemicals that we're currently using in agriculture.
Mhm. Okay, this is a very important thing you are trying to solve. Beside that, I just want to know, like, do you have any experience work in agricultural sector outside Singapore? Let's say Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, or even Malaysia.
I don't have any experience working in any agricultural sectors outside of Singapore, but I read up extensively on agriculture. It was kind of like a pet hobby or a pet interest that took off last year when I was studying climate change, and I still read about it from time to time just to like follow up on the news about it.
Yes, as you are researchers in climate change and especially agricultural point of view, so what the solutions we have to follow for agricultural developments or climate sustainable, like the sustainability.
First of all, I think what is most important by way of like agriculture is to one try to find more sustainable alternatives to meat, either by encouraging more people to go vegetarian or vegan, or by scaling up lab grown meat and making it profitable and suitable for mass production. Because if you stop eating red meat and you go mostly vegetarian or vegan, you can effectively slash your carbon footprint, the carbon footprint of your diet, by at least 50%. But the other really big issue besides but the other really big issue in agriculture besides the emissions caused by livestock farming is food wastage, because as of current, we actually do ironically produce enough food in the world to feed a population of 10 billion. It's just that we throw away roughly about 1/3 of what we produce, which is really sad and wasteful, in part because of like how the economy is structured, and in part because we are not managing our supply chains efficiently, and a lot of people in developed countries have gotten very complacent about just throwing away good food.
Mhm, mhm. Yes. One specific thing in recent years about the lab grown food, step by step is growing. This process is growing. So, can you share the whole process or the process of lab grown food with us?
Lab grown meat is meat that is 100% cruelty free, because it's meat that you can get without raising or killing any animals. Basically, how scientists make it is that they take a cell culture and they grow it in a petri dish of proteins, and after a short period, that culture begins to grow in the same way that a human embryo would grow, but it's not sentient, it can't feel anything, you're not killing anything. That's how the Impossible Burger is made. And the Impossible Burger is, I think, at least 2 to 3 times as expensive as a normal restaurant burger in Singapore. But like lab grown meat is becoming a more accepted alternative, and it's actually becoming quite trendy and quite popular because there are more and more vegans amongst millennials and Generation Z kids. So what we're really hoping for with lab grown meat is that it can be scaled up and mass produced.
Yes. Okay, this is very interesting procedure. And beside that, you want to discuss about the carbon footprint and global warming now playing a very important roles, and every country is suffering right now. So, in agricultural sector, what the modern procedures we can follow, and this carbon footprint and this kind of thing, how we manage, especially developing countries, how they can work, what's the experience you want to share, or what the idea of what you want to share with us?
Frankly, I think that developing countries have been very unfairly marginalized in terms of climate change because, ironically, they're the least responsible for carbon emissions, but the most vulnerable countries in Africa will be the worst badly hit by climate change. It's Africa and South Asia especially, and we can already see in 2020 alone that the effects have begun to like weigh down on these parts of the developing world. But in terms of how the agricultural sector can adapt to climate change, I think that to sum it up, two very important things have to happen at the same time. One, agriculture has to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels, and two, agriculture itself has to adapt to a changing climate. More and more scientists are working on making more resilient strains of wheat and rice that can be more resistant to climate shocks like droughts and floods, or at least like more efficient in terms of how they use water. But part of the problem with agriculture is that agriculture itself is actually a huge source of emissions because for every 1 calorie of food that you eat, if that was food grown from the industrial capitalist agricultural system, it took 10 calories of fossil fuel to grow that 1 calorie of food because our current agricultural system is very dependent on fertilizer that is made from fossil fuels. And a lot of our food is imported because of how the global agricultural system has evolved in the last 50 years to rely heavily on globalization and very complex supply chains. But for the agricultural sector to reduce its carbon footprints, it definitely needs to embrace relocalization and shorter supply chains, which means that people should be, I mean, from a consumer and individual level, we can start to encourage consumers to buy more local produce and to be conscientious about like not buying produce with a heavy carbon footprint like beef or like long haul fruits and vegetables that were grown on the other side of the world.
Yes, I understand your point of view. As I'm also from developing nations, so I saw that one of the major problem is supply chain for agricultural arena. So specifically, farmers they produce vegetable, rice, fish, many things they are producing, but they are not getting original price. Maybe because of the middleman, many of the middlemen actually making maximum of the profit, but the farmer they cannot make enough profit. Even for these systems, many of the farmer actually has a lot of problem. I think for developing nations, it's a major problem. So, what does supply chain management in modern way you are thinking? Do you have any model? Do you have any specific practical projects that farmer can follow the supply chain management and they can get more profit, and the middlemen of the supply chain they can reduce, and by this way economy become more sustainable and farmer lives become more efficient?
This is kind of tangentially related to my day job, but currently I'm teaching myself to become a blockchain developer. And one of the most interesting sustainability related developments in blockchain is that some blockchain developers are looking at ways that we can use blockchain to verify ethical farming practices. That means that we can use blockchain to only source from middlemen or bulk buyers or suppliers who pay their farmers fairly and don't subject them to like poverty wages while exploiting them. Because how blockchain technology works is that it's a distributed ledger technology which can be independently verified through smart contracts, which means that it's decentralized and it can't be hacked or manipulated by malicious third parties or by fraudsters. The issue of supply chains is a very complex one, and it's mostly rooted in corruption and the exploitation of very marginal people, as you said, like especially farmers who are in developing nations. I know that this was a major problem during the Green Revolution boom in India, when a lot of farmers, when they couldn't afford to buy GMO seeds to compete with like big companies, like with big agricultural companies or big agriculture suppliers, a lot of them resorted to committing suicide out of the stress and despair. And that is happening right now in Africa and in other parts of Latin America. So I think in terms of creating more humane and more sustainable supply chains, what we can focus on creating are ways to, I guess for lack of a better term, better ways to monitor the humane treatment of farmers. And honestly, I think this is at its heart a human rights issue, because if you pay farmers a decent living wage that ensures that they're not living in poverty, that will incentivize them to not have to maximize profit, but instead focus on sustainable farming methods. There's already been some success with this in West Africa, where there have been some African farmers who have experimented with soil restoration projects, and a lot of them were very happy to report that when they actually minimize their use of commercial fossil fuel fertilizer and industrial chemicals, a lot of which are actually very harmful, but we eat in surprisingly high amounts. Yeah, a lot of these farmers actually said that when they started using organic farming practices, their yields like doubled or tripled, and they were able to make quite a big profit on it. So I think that really at its heart, it just boils down to being more humane to small-scale farmers and ensuring that they're treated ethically.
Yes, this is very interesting thing. Even many government now, they are more focusing on sustainable agricultural system, and yes, this is very important because food is main sources of energy for us. So beside that, like example in the food sectors, even agricultural sectors, I know personally, even I'm from a developing nation, so they have many traditional methods, but because of many new technology, let's say what you are talking about, fertilizer. Before that, without fertilizer, they are producing their crops and vegetables and everything. Now they are heavily using, because population also growing and many things happening. So like, what do you think if in the agricultural sectors we use traditional methods for producing our food? Is there any solution like that, or like combination of traditional methods and the modern technology?
I would say that
want to say?
a combination of traditional methods and modern technology is probably our best bet, because there's a lot to gain from both. There have been a lot of wonderful breakthroughs in modern technology with new ways to grow food sustainability while still reducing our chemical impacts while still reducing the amount of chemicals that we use to grow food. But at the same time, I think you are right. A lot of us, a lot of modern agriculture discounts how much wisdom there is in traditional farming practices. And one of the agricultural trends that has come to the forefront in the last 5 years or so is permaculture, which is based on principles of sustainability. And the interesting thing about permaculture is that it involves no chemicals at all, zero chemicals, 100% organic, and it involves growing food in a way that you completely reuse all of the nutrients that you create. But but the thing about permaculture is that it's actually based on the horticultural principles of Native American people and uh, indigenous rainforest people. It's a very ancient it's a very ancient agricultural method that has been around for maybe tens of thousands or 20 of thousands of years, and we're only rediscovering this wisdom now.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, very interesting. Besides that, what's the cultural Singapore culture you want to share with our audience? What's the beautiful culture Singapore has?
I think that Singapore is a wonderful place to live because we have a very low crime rate. We are very prosperous, and we are very prosperous, and it's a very clean city. We take hygiene here very seriously, which is part of why I think we're handling the COVID-19 pandemic so well. But sometimes I worry that because we've become so prosperous in the last 50 years or so, we are now very complacent about possible existential threats that could hurt us because we've we've become so comfortable here that most of us don't think that global warming can hurt Singapore because we just think that we can like build a seawall or pay more to import our food. That is not the case. We we are right on the equator, so if the sea level rises, we it's unlikely that we'll be able to actually build a seawall high enough to keep all the seawater out. Like
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. What's your last comments on agricultural sustainability for around the world? Because for your NGO, you are working with North America, you are working with Europe, even you are working in Asia Pacific market. So, what's your advice? What's your guidelines? Even you are researcher on that particular points. Uh,
um I would say that the quicker we can transition to renewable agriculture, the better. But I mean, that's true of every other aspect of climate change. The quicker that we can transition away from a fossil fuel intensive model to a sustainable, renewable model, the better. But I also think that what is most important for us right now and what we're beginning to realize thanks to COVID-19 is that we can't rely on supply chains forever. And I think that as far as possible, every region or sub-region or even every nation, if possible, should try to be as self-sufficient as possible in terms of growing its own food, both for reasons of national security and just because that is the more environmentally friendly alternative.
mhm. Mm. Thank you, Sarah. Actually, we get a very good insight about agricultural things, lab-grown food, as well as supply chains and how we can maintain the sustainability in agricultural sector. So, World Talent Economy Forum, we are also working for UN Global Sustainable Goals, 17 goals. So, agriculture is very important for us, especially we work in different developing nations. So, developing nations has small country and huge populations. So, agricultural solution is most important. Even in present pandemic situations, they have to create their own national productions because many of the country they have a supply chain related issues. So hopefully with your research, with your guidelines, the world will get new solution, especially you are working for an NGO fully voluntary basis. So this is a very good example that our young generations they can learn from you. that you are also from NUS, National University of Singapore, and you are doing voluntary jobs. By this way, we can encourage our youth, and we can do a lot of work together. So thank you for your valuable time, and especially one of the audience, his name is Sitaram Mahat. He said super. So your idea, I think he like, and audience, they are observing, they give you a lot of support, and this way we can make a better world, and definitely we can change this world in an effective way. Thank you for your valuable time.
Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you.